The diamond on my finger caught the light, sending sparkles dancing across the pristine white tablecloth. I couldn't help but smile, twisting the ring back and forth, still not quite believing it was there. After 10 years, Michael had finally proposed. "Emily, dear, you're positively glowing." Eleanor, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, reached across the table and patted my hand. "I'm so thrilled," Michael finally popped the question. "Lord knows I've been dropping hints for years." I laughed, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "Trust me, Eleanor, I've been dropping hints too. But you know Michael, always moving at his own pace." Eleanor's smile faltered for just a moment, so quickly I almost missed it. She took a sip of her tea, her perfectly manicured nails clinking against the delicate china. "Yes, well, that's my Michael. Always been a bit stubborn." Something in her tone made me pause. "Is everything all right, Eleanor?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, of course, dear. It's just—" She leaned in, lowering her voice. "There's something you should know about our family. Something I probably should have told you years ago." My heart started to race. "What is it?" Eleanor glanced around the crowded restaurant as if checking for eavesdroppers. "It's about Michael's father. The story he's told you, well, it's not entirely true." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean? Michael said his father died when he was young." "That's what Michael believes," Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But the truth is, his father left us, abandoned us when Michael was just a baby." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What? But... Why would Michael lie about that?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "He doesn't know, Emily. I told him his father died. I couldn't bear for him to know the truth." My mind was reeling. How could Michael not know something so fundamental about his own life? And why had Eleanor kept this secret for so long? Before I could ask any more questions, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Michael. "Where are you? Thought we were meeting at 2?" I glanced at my watch and cursed under my breath. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor. I completely lost track of time. I'm supposed to be meeting Michael to look at venues." Eleanor nodded, composing herself quickly. "Of course, dear. Go. We can talk more later." As I gathered my things, Eleanor grabbed my wrist. "Emily, please, don't say anything to Michael. Not yet. Let me be the one to tell him." I hesitated, torn between my loyalty to Michael and the pleading look in Eleanor's eyes. Finally, I nodded. "All right. But soon, okay? He deserves to know." Eleanor smiled gratefully. "Thank you, dear. You're going to make a wonderful addition to our family." As I hurried out of the restaurant, my mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Joy at my engagement warred with the shock of Eleanor's revelation. How well did I really know the man I was about to marry? I spotted Michael waiting outside the first venue on our list, looking handsome as ever in his tailored suit. He grinned when he saw me, pulling me in for a kiss. "There's my beautiful fiancé," he said. "Ready to start planning our future?" I forced a smile, pushing down the guilt and confusion roiling in my stomach. "Of course. Let's go." As we walked into the venue, hand in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that our perfect love story was about to get a lot more complicated. I stared at my phone, my heart sinking as I read Michael's text. "Sorry, babe. Can't make it to the florist today. Work emergency." This was the 3rd time in 2 weeks he'd canceled our wedding preparations. I sighed, tossing the phone onto the couch. The excitement of planning our big day was quickly turning into frustration and doubt. The doorbell rang, startling me out of my thoughts. I opened the door to find Eleanor standing there, a sympathetic smile on her face. "Emily, dear, I hope I'm not intruding, but I thought you might need some company today." I felt a rush of gratitude. "Eleanor, you're a lifesaver. Please, come in." As we settled in the living room with cups of tea, Eleanor asked, "So how are the wedding plans coming along?" I couldn't hold back anymore. The words tumbled out in a rush. "Honestly, they're not. Michael keeps canceling on me. It's like he doesn't even care about the wedding." Eleanor's face softened with concern. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm sure that's not true. Michael can be difficult sometimes, but he loves you." I nodded, not entirely convinced. "I know. It's just, ever since you told me about his father, I can't help but wonder what else I don't know about him." Eleanor reached out and squeezed my hand. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I never meant to cause trouble between you two. Perhaps I shouldn't have said anything." "No," I said firmly. "I'm glad you told me. I just wish Michael would open up to me more." We spent the next hour talking, Eleanor sharing stories about Michael's childhood that made me laugh and reminded me why I fell in love with him. By the time she left, I felt a little better, but the nagging doubt remained. That evening Michael came home late, looking tired and distracted. "Hey," I said, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice. "How was your work emergency?" He barely glanced at me as he loosened his tie. Oh, yeah, just a client freaking out about nothing. You know how it is." I took a deep breath. "Michael, we need to talk about the wedding. You keep canceling our appointments, and I'm starting to feel like I'm planning this whole thing alone." He finally looked at me, his expression a mix of guilt and irritation. "Come on, Em. You know how busy I am at work. Can't you handle this stuff?" His dismissive tone sparked something in me. "This is our wedding, Michael. Not just mine. It should be important to both of us." Michael's face hardened. "Of course it's important to me. I just don't see why we need to make such a big deal out of every little detail." We argued back and forth, our voices rising until we were both shouting. Finally, Michael grabbed his keys. "I need some air," he snapped, slamming the door behind him. I collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down my face. How had we gone from the joy of our engagement to this in just a few short weeks? My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Checking in. Hope everything's okay." Without thinking, I called her back. "Eleanor?" I choked out between sobs. "Can you come over? I really need someone to talk to." "Of course, dear," she said without hesitation. "I'll be right there." As I hung up, I felt a mix of relief and guilt. I should be talking to Michael, working things out with him. Instead, I was turning to his mother for comfort. But as I waited for Eleanor to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling that she understood me better than Michael did right now, and that thought terrified me more than anything else. The clock on the nightstand glared at me, 2:37 a.m. I rolled over, the empty space beside me, a cold reminder of Michael's absence. This was the third night this week he'd stayed out late, claiming it was just innocent fun with the guys. "Bachelor's last hurrah," he'd said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. I grabbed my phone, thumb hovering over Michael's name. No, I decided. I wouldn't be that person, constantly checking up on him. Instead, I opened my messages with Eleanor. "You awake?" I typed, then immediately regretted it. What kind of soon-to-be daughter-in-law texts her fiancé's mother in the middle of the night? To my surprise, a reply came almost instantly. "Can't sleep either? Want to talk?" Relief washed over me. "Michael's out again. I'm worried. Come over for breakfast tomorrow. We'll chat." The next morning, I found myself sitting at Eleanor's kitchen table, a steaming mug of coffee warming my hands. "I don't know what to do," I confessed. "It's like Michael's a different person lately." Eleanor's face was a mask of concern. "Has he said anything about his father?" I shook my head. "No, and I haven't brought it up. I'm scared it'll just make things worse." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Emily, dear, I'm so sorry. I never meant for my secret to cause such trouble. It's not your fault," I assured her, "but I can't help feeling like there's something Michael's not telling me." Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Where are you? Woke up and you were gone." I showed Eleanor the message, my frustration bubbling over. "He's one to talk. He didn't even come home last night." Eleanor's expression hardened. "This isn't like Michael. Something's not right." As I typed a reply, another text came through. This one made my blood run cold. "Who's Vanessa? Why does she keep calling you?" I stared at the screen, confusion and anger warring inside me. "Eleanor, I don't know any Vanessa. What is he talking about?" Eleanor's face paled. "Oh, dear, I think I might know who Vanessa is." My heart raced. "What? Who?" She hesitated, then said softly, "Vanessa is Michael's father's new wife." The room spun. "What? But you said his father left when Michael was a baby. How could he?" "I'm so sorry, Emily. There's more to the story than I told you. Michael's father, he's been trying to reconnect. I've been keeping his messages from Michael, trying to protect him." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "So all this time, Michael's father has been alive? Trying to contact him, and you've been hiding it?" Eleanor nodded, tears in her eyes. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but now, with Michael acting so strangely, I'm afraid he might have found out somehow." My mind raced. Could this explain Michael's recent behavior? The late nights, the secretiveness? Was he meeting with his long-lost father behind my back? "I have to go," I said, standing abruptly. I need to talk to Michael. Eleanor grabbed my arm. Emily, wait, please be careful. Michael, he can be like his father sometimes. Unpredictable when he's upset. Her words sent a chill down my spine. What exactly was she implying? As I drove home, my emotions swirled like a storm. Anger at Michael for lying, at Eleanor for keeping secrets, at myself for not seeing what was happening right in front of me. I pulled into our driveway, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. But as I opened the front door, I froze. The house was in chaos. Drawers pulled out, contents strewn across the floor. And there, in the middle of it all, stood Michael, a suitcase at his feet and a wild look in his eyes. Michael, I whispered, fear gripping my heart. What's going on? He turned to me, his face a mask of pain and fury. I know everything, Emily. About my father, about the lies, and I know you've been talking to my mother behind my back. As he advanced towards me, I realized with terrifying clarity that I didn't know this man at all. And I had no idea what he was capable of. The morning of my wedding day dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. I stood before the mirror, my white dress a ghostly reflection of the bride I was supposed to be. But all I could see were the shadows of doubt in my eyes. Last night's confrontation with Michael played on repeat in my mind. His anger, his accusations, the way he'd grabbed my arm when I tried to leave. In the end, he'd broken down, sobbing about his father's betrayal and begging for forgiveness. We'd talked for hours and he'd promised to be better, to be honest from now on. But as I adjusted my veil, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a terrible mistake. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Emily? Eleanor's voice called. Can I come in? I hesitated, then called out, Yes, come in. Eleanor entered, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance. Oh, Emily, you look beautiful. I tried to smile, but it felt forced. Thank you, Eleanor. She approached me, her face etched with concern. Are you sure about this, dear? After everything that's happened? I turned back to the mirror, avoiding her gaze. Michael explained everything. He was just upset about his father. We're going to work through it together. Eleanor's reflection frowned. Emily, I know my son. He's not always... Please, I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. I've made my decision. Eleanor nodded, her eyes sad. All right, dear, I just want you to be happy. As she left, I felt a pang of guilt. Eleanor had become such a source of comfort these past weeks, but she was still Michael's mother. I couldn't keep relying on her. The ceremony was a blur. I walked down the aisle, my eyes locked on Michael. He looked handsome in his tux, his smile bright and reassuring. But as I reached him, I noticed a slight tremor in his hands. We exchanged vows, Michael's voice steady as he promised love and fidelity. When it was my turn, I hesitated for just a moment, my doubts threatening to choke me. But I pushed through, the words leaving my lips even as my heart raced with uncertainty. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the officiant declared, and Michael pulled me in for a kiss. The small crowd of family and friends applauded, but it sounded distant and muffled to my ears. At the reception, I plastered on a smile, accepting congratulations and posing for photos. But my eyes kept drifting to Michael, watching as he downed glass after glass of champagne. Are you okay? I whispered during a quiet moment. He grinned, his eyes slightly unfocused. Never better, babe. We did it. As the night wore on, Michael became more boisterous, his laughter too loud, his movements unsteady. I saw Eleanor watching him with a mix of concern and resignation. Finally, as the last guests were leaving, Michael stumbled, nearly knocking over the gift table. I rushed to steady him, the smell of alcohol heavy on his breath. I think it's time we went home, I said softly. He laughed, pulling me close. Home? But the party's just getting started. I extricated myself from his grip, my patience wearing thin. Michael, please, you're drunk. His face darkened. Don't tell me what I am, he snapped, loud enough for the remaining guests to turn and stare. Embarrassment and anger flooded through me. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, I felt like I was drowning. Eleanor appeared at my side, her hand on my arm. Let me help you get him home, she offered quietly. I nodded, too tired to argue. As we maneuvered a protesting Michael into the car, Eleanor squeezed my hand. Remember, Emily, she said, her voice low and urgent, you always have a choice. As we drove away, Michael already passed out in the back seat, her words echoed in my mind. A choice. But what choice did I have now? I was married, for better or for worse. Looking at Michael's slumped form in the rearview mirror, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the worst I'd signed up for? And if so, how much worse could it get? I zipped up the last suitcase, my heart fluttering with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Our honeymoon to Bali was just hours away, a chance to escape the tension of the past few weeks and start our married life on a positive note. Maybe, just maybe, this trip would be the fresh start Michael and I desperately needed. As I wheeled the luggage to the front door, my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, honey," I answered, trying to keep my voice light. "Are you on your way home? Our flight's in 4 hours." There was a pause, then Michael's voice came through, strained and hesitant. I have some bad news." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" "It's my mom," he said. "She's in the hospital, some kind of sudden illness. I'm with her now." I sank onto the couch, my mind reeling. "Oh my God, is she okay? What happened?" "The doctors aren't sure yet," Michael replied. "But I don't think we can go on our honeymoon, not with Mom like this." The words hit me like a physical blow. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears of frustration and disbelief. "Michael, are you sure? Can't your sister stay with her? We've been planning this trip for months." I know, he said, his voice rising. "But she's my mother, Emily. I can't just leave her like this." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. "Okay, I understand. Should I come to the hospital?" "No," Michael said quickly, then softened his tone. "No, that's okay. You stay home. I'll call you with updates." As I hung up, a nagging doubt crept into my mind. Something about Michael's tone, the way he'd refused my offer to come to the hospital, it didn't sit right. Before I could talk myself out of it, I dialed Eleanor's number. It rang several times before going to voicemail. I frowned, my unease growing. I paced the living room, my mind racing. What if Eleanor wasn't really sick? What if this was just another of Michael's lies? But why would he lie about this? Hours passed, and still no word from Michael. My calls went straight to voicemail. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and drove to the hospital. At the reception, I asked for Eleanor's room number, only to be met with confusion. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the nurse said, "but we don't have any patient by that name." My world tilted on its axis. That's impossible. My husband said she was admitted this morning." The nurse shook her head sympathetically. "I've been on shift all day. No, Eleanor has been admitted." I stumbled out of the hospital, my mind in chaos. Michael had lied. Again. But why? Where was he really? As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number, but the content made my blood run cold. "Your husband isn't who you think he is. Meet me at the Bluebird Cafe in an hour if you want the truth. V. Vanessa, Michael's father's new wife, the woman at the center of all this chaos." I stood in the hospital parking lot, the weight of decision heavy on my shoulders. Should I meet this mysterious Vanessa? Should I confront Michael? Or should I finally listen to that voice inside me that had been screaming for weeks, telling me to run? My fingers hovered over my phone, ready to reply to the text. In that moment, I knew my decision would change everything. There was no going back from here. With a deep breath, I typed my response, sealing my fate with 4 simple words. "I'll be there. Emily." As I got into my car, heading towards the unknown, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a ruined honeymoon. This was the beginning of the end of everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the man I thought I loved. My hands trembled as I pushed open the door to the Bluebird Cafe. The aroma of coffee and pastries did nothing to calm my frayed nerves. I scanned the room, my heart pounding, until I spotted a woman in the corner booth. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and I knew instantly this was Vanessa. As I slid into the seat across from her, she spoke first. "Emily, I presume? Thank you for coming." I nodded, studying her face. She was beautiful, with an air of confidence that made me feel instantly inadequate. "You said you had the truth about Michael. I'm listening." Vanessa sighed, pushing a manila folder across the table. "Everything you need to know is in here, but I warn you, it's not pretty." With shaking hands, I opened the folder. Photos spilled out. Michael with another woman, laughing, kissing. Dates stamped in the corner showed this wasn't just a one-time thing. It had been going on for months. "Who is she?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "His secretary," Vanessa replied. But that's not all. Keep reading. I flipped through documents, bank statements, emails, even a copy of a lease agreement. The pieces started to fall into place, each revelation more devastating than the last. He's been embezzling from his company, I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. And he's planning to leave the country? Vanessa nodded grimly. With her? The honeymoon cancellation? It was just an excuse. He's planning to disappear with the money and his mistress. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a sea of betrayal. But why? Why tell me all this? Because, Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes intense. Michael isn't just hurting you. He's hurting everyone around him, including his father, my husband. We want to stop him before it's too late. Just then, my phone rang. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen. I answered, my voice shaky. Eleanor? Emily, dear. I've been trying to reach you. Is everything all right? Michael said you two had to cancel your honeymoon because of me, but I'm perfectly fine. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I ended the call, my mind racing. She's not sick. She never was. Vanessa's expression was a mix of sympathy and determination. Now you know the truth. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I stood up abruptly, a plan forming in my mind. I'm going to confront him. And then I'm going on that honeymoon, but not with Michael. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? A grim smile played on my lips. I'm taking Eleanor instead. Let's see how Michael likes it when his lies catch up to him. I rushed home, my mind a whirlwind of emotions and plans. As I burst through the door, I found Michael packing a suitcase. Em, he exclaimed, surprise and guilt flashing across his face. I thought you'd be out. I was just... Packing for our canceled honeymoon? I interrupted, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Or maybe for your little getaway with your secretary. The color drained from Michael's face. What are you talking about? I threw the folder on the bed, photos and documents scattering. I know everything, Michael. The affair, the embezzlement, all of it. He lunged for the folder, but I was quicker. I snatched it back, backing away. Don't even think about it. It's over, Michael. I'm leaving and I'm taking everything we have. You'll have nothing left when I'm done. Michael's expression morphed from shock to anger. He advanced towards me, his fists clenched. You can't do this to me. I won't let you. Fear coursed through me, but I stood my ground. Try and stop me. I dare you. As Michael raised his hand, the front door burst open. Eleanor rushed in, her face a mask of fury. Michael Andrew Thompson, don't you dare touch her. Michael froze, his eyes darting between Eleanor and me. I took advantage of his confusion, grabbing my pre-packed suitcase. Come on, Eleanor, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. We have a plane to catch. As we walked out, leaving a stunned Michael behind, I felt a strange mix of pain, relief, and exhilaration. The life I thought I knew was over, but a new chapter was just beginning. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The moment I stepped through our front door, the tension in the air was palpable. Michael sat on the couch, his face a mask of barely contained anger. Our impromptu honeymoon with Eleanor had given me time to gather my thoughts, but nothing could have prepared me for this confrontation. Welcome home, Michael said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Did you enjoy your little vacation with my mother? I dropped my suitcase, steeling myself for the battle ahead. Cut the act, Michael. We both know what's really going on here. He stood, his eyes flashing dangerously. Oh, and what exactly is that, Emily? Your affair, for starters, I spat, my voice trembling with rage. And let's not forget the embezzlement. Did you really think you could just run away with your secretary and all that stolen money? Michael's face paled, then flushed with anger. Who told you? Was it Vanessa? That meddling bitch? It doesn't matter who told me, I shot back. What matters is that it's true, isn't it, Michael? He lunged forward, grabbing my arm. You don't understand. I had no choice. I wrenched away from him, my heart pounding. No choice? You had every choice. You chose to lie, to cheat, to steal. I did it for us, he yelled, his composure crumbling. For our future, I laughed bitterly. Our future. There is no our anymore, Michael. You destroyed that the moment you decided to betray me. Suddenly the door burst open. Eleanor rushed in, followed by a man I'd never seen before. Michael's face drained of all color. Dad? He whispered, his voice small and uncertain. The man, Michael's father, stepped forward, his face a mix of sadness and determination. It's time to face the music, son. Michael's eyes darted between us all, like a cornered animal. You don't understand, any of you. I was going to make it right. I just needed more time. More time for what? I demanded. More lies? More betrayal? Eleanor moved to my side, her hand on my shoulder. Emily, dear, I'm so sorry. I never imagined Michael would go this far. As the reality of the situation crashed down around us, Michael's facade finally crumbled. He sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But his words rang hollow in my ears. The man I thought I knew, the man I had loved for 10 years and married just weeks ago, was a stranger to me now. It's over, Michael, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. I want a divorce. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. Emily, please. We can work this out. I'll make it right, I swear. I shook my head, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. No, Michael. You've had your chances. I'm done. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. 2 police officers entered, their faces grim. Michael Thompson? One of them said. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of embezzlement and fraud. As they read him his rights and led him away in handcuffs, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, anger, and an overwhelming sense of loss. The life I thought I had, the future I had planned, it was all gone in an instant. Eleanor wrapped her arm around me as we watched Michael being driven away. What will you do now, dear? She asked softly. I took a deep breath, feeling both terrified and strangely liberated. I don't know, I admitted. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I can finally start living for myself. As the police car disappeared around the corner, I realized that this wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one filled with uncertainty, but also with the promise of freedom and self-discovery. The courthouse loomed before me, a monument to the end of my marriage and the beginning of my new life. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what lay ahead. Eleanor's reassuring hand on my shoulder gave me the strength to push open the heavy doors. As we entered the courtroom, I saw Michael for the first time since his arrest. He looked haggard, his once confident demeanor replaced by a shell of a man. Our eyes met briefly, and I felt a twinge of something. Not love, not anymore, but a complex mixture of pity, anger, and regret. The proceedings began, a blur of legal jargon and formalities. I barely registered the words until the judge addressed me directly. Mrs. Thompson, do you wish to make a statement before the court renders its decision? I stood, my legs shaky but my resolve firm. Yes, Your Honor. As I faced the courtroom, I saw not just Michael, but the faces of those whose lives he'd affected, his parents, our friends, even his former secretary, who looked as broken as I felt. 10 years ago, I fell in love with a man I thought I knew, I began, my voice growing stronger with each word. I built my life around him, dreamed of a future with him, but that man never truly existed. Instead, I married a stranger, a liar, a cheater, a thief. Michael flinched at my words, but I pressed on. I stand here today not just as a victim of his crimes, but as a survivor. I've lost my marriage, my trust, and the future I thought I'd have. But I've gained something too, the truth and the strength to face it. I turned to Michael, meeting his gaze head-on. I forgive you, Michael. Not for your sake, but for mine. I refuse to let your betrayal define me or my future. As I sat down, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The judge's verdict came swiftly. Michael was sentenced to prison for his financial crimes, and our divorce was granted. Outside the courthouse, Eleanor enveloped me in a tight hug. I'm so proud of you, Emily, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I pulled back, studying her face. Eleanor, I don't know how to thank you for everything. She smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Oh, my dear, you don't need to thank me. Your family, no matter what. Those words, so simple yet so profound, broke something open inside me. I began to sob, releasing all the pain, anger, and fear I'd been holding on to for so long. Eleanor held me, her presence a balm to my battered soul. As my tears subsided, I realized something fundamental had shifted within me. The betrayal still hurt, the wounds were still raw, but I was no longer defined by them. I was more than Michael's ex-wife, more than a victim of his deceit. I was Emily, strong, resilient, and ready to write my own story. What now? Eleanor asked gently as we walked away from the courthouse. I took a deep breath, feeling the warm sun on my face and the promise of possibility in the air. Now I start over. I find out who I am without Michael, without the lies and the doubt. Eleanor squeezed my hand. And you won't be alone. I'll be right here every step of the way. I smiled, feeling a genuine spark of hope for the first time in months. I know. And that means more to me than you could ever know. As we drove away, leaving behind the shattered remains of my old life, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges I couldn't yet imagine. But I was ready to face them, armed with the truth, supported by unexpected friendships, and fueled by a newfound belief in myself. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had also set me free. And in that freedom, I found the strength to embrace the unknown, to forgive without forgetting, and to love again, starting with myself. As Eleanor and I planned a celebratory dinner, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful relationships can bloom from the ashes of betrayal. My story wasn't over, it was just beginning. And this time I would be the author of my own happily ever after.
Why are you here? Don't tell me a high school graduate. And poor person is trying to get treated by a doctor? My ex-husband chuckled to himself as if he found his own words amusing. Unmoved by his disdainful behavior, I remained calm. It's none of your business. What a cold woman you are. Just so you know, even at a university hospital, there's no cure for being a high school graduate or poor. Unable to find humor in his poor joke, I didn't laugh. Just then, I noticed a nurse rushing towards us. She waved her hand when she saw us. It's an emergency. We have a patient in critical condition, unconscious. Please come immediately. My name is Mandy. I'm the eldest of 4 siblings and lost my father when I was in elementary school. After his death, my mother raised us alone. But the debt he left made it difficult for her, despite her hard work. I was forced to work at a local factory to help support my family. I wanted my younger siblings to follow their desired paths without financial hardship. So I worked relentlessly. The turning point came when I was 18. After being invited to dinner several times by a supervisor, Steve from my department, he proposed a relationship. And I also had a favorable impression of him. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and on my 20th birthday, I accepted his marriage proposal. I had told Steve about my educational background from the beginning of our relationship. But he always said, education doesn't matter when you love someone, and strived to treat me as an equal. Although he was older, he never acted superior and always respected me. However, that was only a temporary dream. Over time, Steve increasingly looked down on me. Hey, show some gratitude. Who do you think is making it possible for you to live like this? His disgruntled voice made me tense up. After our marriage, at his strong insistence, I quit the factory to become a full-time housewife. I had planned to continue working even after marriage, but he wanted me to stay home, preparing meals and keeping the house clean every day. I was worried about reducing the amount I could send to my mother. But I couldn't bring myself to resist, so I quit my job. Yet, Steve looked down on me as an unemployed who didn't work and only cost money. Steve, I want to work too. He scoffed at my feeble attempt at protest. Few companies would hire a high school graduate. Just obey me and keep quiet doing the housework. His cold voice echoed. Quitting my job as he demanded was a mistake. The allowance he gave me was gradually decreasing. If I said I needed more money, he would surely blame my management skills. Knowing this, I couldn't speak up and covered the shortfall with my own savings. While watching my husband drink idly in the evening, I thought vaguely about divorce. Fortunately, I'm still young. If I divorced Steve, I could still have children with someone else. He probably doesn't know how much I'm suffering. He must think I'm a stupid woman who doesn't listen to him. Slowly feeling my heart growing cold, I pondered without being able to take any action. As I watched my savings dwindle and endured Steve's contemptuous behavior and our poor marital relationship, I realized this couldn't continue. I repeatedly tried to discuss things with him, but each time, he avoided conversation with excuses like being tired from work or having plans to go out. Eventually, he even started saying, "I don't even want to talk to someone with such a low education." I had reached my limit. After finishing dinner and putting things away, I took out the divorce papers hidden in a drawer. My section was already filled out. All that was left was to bring up divorce to him. Moistening my dried lips, I summoned the courage to speak to him as he watched TV. "Steve, I have something important to discuss." Hearing my tense voice, Steve turned around lazily. Holding out the thin piece of paper, I faced him directly. "I want a divorce." Steve's eyebrows twitched. I braced myself for yelling. However, contrary to my expectation, no shout came. Cautiously checking his reaction, Steve quietly clenched his fists, his face turning red with anger. Yet, he didn't approach me. Perhaps thinking that doing anything more would mean defeat. Trying desperately to control his swirling anger. After a long silence, he growled in a low voice, "A high school graduate like you." His fists trembled more intensely, his angry gaze piercing me. His cold look was chilling, and I instinctively stepped back. "Do you really think you, a high school graduate, can defy me? You don't have any right to initiate a divorce." My husband's voice was loud and intimidating as he vented his anger. Still, I couldn't back down. I had suffered enough at his hands. Holding back the urge to cry, I glared back at him. Perhaps surprised by my unexpected strength, he momentarily looked taken aback. Clutching the divorce papers in one hand, I raised my smartphone towards him. On the screen were messages between him and a female subordinate, which was clear evidence of his affair. "While you can't even provide me with enough for basic living expenses, it seems you've been quite generous to her. If you don't need me anymore, then let's get a divorce and set me free." For the first time, my husband was at a loss for words. He apparently didn't know I had evidence of his affair. He must have been overly confident that I would never find out. After a while, unable to find an excuse, and realizing he couldn't talk his way out of it, he laughed defiantly. "It's exhausting to live with a stupid woman. I need a break." Without any remorse, he admitted to the affair and turned his back on me as if the conversation was over. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, and I circled around to turn off the TV, bringing silence back to the living room. His sullen face turned towards me. I steadied my trembling legs and presented the divorce papers to him again. "All I'm asking is for you to sign this. Please." I couldn't understand why he was so reluctant to divorce. He looked down on me, saying he was tired of living with me and cheated with another woman, yet he clung to this marriage. If he insisted I had no right to ask for a divorce, I was willing to let him initiate it. Public perception and pride didn't matter to me if it meant getting away from him. "If you really want a divorce that badly," he said with a sigh as he reached for the divorce papers, "then return all the living expenses I've paid you. If you can do that, I might agree to the divorce." "That's impossible." "Can't do it, huh? Well, that makes sense since you're a jobless and high school graduate." He chuckled deeply, finding something amusing in his own cruelty. Over the 3 years of our marriage, even by the lowest estimates, He had given me over $50,000 for living expenses. Although I hadn't received much lately, it was still a substantial amount that my savings couldn't cover. Almost all of it went to rent and groceries, and I had little to no discretionary money. Despite my best efforts to save, I often had to dip into my own savings to make ends meet. I couldn't accept his absurd demand, and I felt darkness closing in. He seemed to enjoy laying these impossible conditions on me, watching me struggle. Then, a small flame of resolve lit up within me. I wanted to prove him wrong. My determination solidified. "I'll pay it all back," I declared firmly, meeting his gaze. He half smiled, clearly thinking I couldn't possibly manage it. But that was exactly why I had to do it. "Can I have some time, though? And I'd like to settle the divorce first." "You wouldn't want to keep living with a woman who might take your assets, right?" He seemed uncertain of my intentions for a moment, but then hastily signed the divorce papers without much thought and handed them back to me. "It's just an empty promise you can't keep. Don't spread this around. It would ruin my reputation." With those selfish words, our marriage abruptly came to an end. But I felt no despair. I was fortunate to be only 23 years old. "As long as you're young, you can do anything," my mother always said. I quickly packed my bags and left the house without a second glance at my husband. Dragging my suitcase, I boarded an express bus home. The next time I would see my husband, everything would be dramatically different. I reaffirmed my resolve as I watched the urban landscape flow by outside the window. 12 years later, I found myself standing bewildered in the lobby of a university hospital. It was my first visit, and the vast grounds had me completely lost. I tried to ask for directions, but every staff member seemed too busy to care about a lost visitor. I spun the map in my hands, trying to figure out where I was and where I needed to go. Could it be Mandy? Suddenly, a man's voice called my name from behind. I turned around, startled, to find a man who looked to be approaching middle age. I felt I had seen his face somewhere before but couldn't place it. "Excuse me, but who might you be?" As I asked apologetically, the man sighed deeply and looked down at me. "Oh, come on, does a high school graduate also have bad memories? It's unimaginable to forget someone you were married to." Hearing that, I took a hard look at the man's face. Memories slowly started coming back to me, particularly his condescending gaze. "Steve." Having been addressed by name, Steve settled into a chair in the lobby with a satisfied air. Prompted by him, I somewhat reluctantly took the seat next to him and observed his face again. His hair had thinned, and his face had aged significantly. Most notably, the trim figure he once had was now flabby and his belly protruded. 12 years had indeed changed him. "You recognized me quite well, didn't you?" "Well, of course, your face hasn't changed at all, and you're still ugly." His casual insult didn't faze me. I was too weary to make a fuss about it. My lack of reaction seemed to disappoint him, and he scratched his head disinterestedly, letting an awkward silence hang between us. What did he want by speaking to me? Surely, he couldn't possibly remember the promise from 12 years ago. He adjusted his graying hair and then looked at me with a sly grin. "Why are you here?" "Don't tell me a high school graduate and poor person is trying to get treated by a doctor?" He laughed at his own joke. I remained unaffected by his demeaning behavior. "It's none of your business." What a cold woman. Just so you know, even university hospitals don't have a cure for being a high school graduate or poor. I couldn't muster a laugh at his poor joke. Just then, I noticed a nurse rushing toward us, waving her hand. "Mandy, we have an emergency. The patient is unconscious and in critical condition. Please come right away." I immediately stood up and took a lab coat from the nurse. Steve stared at me in disbelief. "Thank you for your support on your first day after transferring. There are no other doctors available right now." The nurse ushered me away quickly, leaving no time to pay any mind to Steve. I handed him the map I'd been holding, as I didn't have time to dispose of it properly. He watched me, eyes wide, unable to grasp the situation. As you see, I became a doctor. After dealing with the emergency, I was due to enter the consultation room. It was still before the official start of my shift. But wandering the hospital alone, I'd likely get lost again. I reviewed the medical chart and gasped when I saw who it was. Steve, too, widened his eyes in disbelief upon seeing me in the examination room. According to the chart, Steve was suffering from a heart condition and had been referred to the university hospital. I immediately composed myself and returned to my duties. Steve, seemingly dissatisfied, did not attempt to hide his sour expression. "Any questions before you leave?" I asked routinely. "How did a high school graduate become a doctor?" he muttered under his breath. The nurse behind me looked at him with a puzzled expression. I hesitated for a moment before responding. "My father was a doctor. It's not that I was not intelligent enough to attend university." I remembered my father vaguely. He was always busy with work, rarely home, and squandered most of what he earned on alcohol and hostess clubs, even accruing debts. Yet, I was grateful for his passion for education, without which I would not have become a doctor. I had always believed, since I was aware, that I would be a doctor like him. I never struggled academically through elementary and middle school, even in high school, and my mother was always pleased, confident I could become a doctor. After my father passed away, I had to start working. But I continued to study diligently, and eventually applied to medical school. But you couldn't have afforded university. My mother saved all the money I sent home. There was also a scholarship program. "A scholarship? You?" His demeaning tone almost got to me. But I quickly regained my composure and glanced at his worn-out face. "You always underestimated me as a stupid high school graduate. But you just never noticed." His face contorted with displeasure as he glared at me. A nurse whispered from behind that it was almost time. I put away the chart and prepared to call the next patient. Then, as if remembering something, I looked back at him. "Oh, as for the living expenses you wanted me to repay, I can pay them back now, and double the amount. I earn more than you do now." His face flushed a deep red. I had chosen my words carefully to crush his excessive pride. Although his anger visibly bubbled, he managed only to stand up. With a loud noise in the examination room, which was a public space visited by other staff. "What is this, a quack doctor? I'll file a complaint against this hospital." With that disjointed parting shot, he stormed out of the examination room. Left alone, I exhaled deeply, releasing the fatigue. Despite the weariness, I felt oddly refreshed. Eventually, Steve chose to seek treatment at another hospital. But he was advised there as well to return to the university hospital where I worked. When he came back, he looked uncomfortable. After our divorce, the woman he had an affair with had left him, and rumors of his infidelity had spread throughout his office. The affair and our divorce had become public, forcing him to resign. He had been abandoned by both women, damaging his pride, increasing his drinking and smoking, which had led to his heart condition. I felt a slight pity as he faced a major surgery. But considering how he had treated me during our marriage, I couldn't find it in me to forgive him. Of course, his treatment was a separate matter, and I carried out my duties professionally. We still see each other occasionally during his checkups. At one point, he even suggested we try again, but I politely declined. I have no intention of marrying anytime soon and am happily living with my family. It might sound strange for me to say, but as a doctor, my reputation is quite good, and I earn enough to support my mother and siblings. Amidst my busy but fulfilling days, I sometimes reflect on that fruitless marriage.
Marco's laugh echoed in my mind. You wouldn't last a day without me, Elena. That's when I decided our cozy suburban home would make a lovely just-sold postcard to mail to his office. My name is Elena Vasquez, and life had a way of testing me. 5 years ago, I married Marco, a charming coworker with a sharp wit and an alluring smile. Fallen by a mutual passion for success, we became a power couple at the office, only to face our vulnerability at home. The dream of nurturing a family together began to crumble with each failed pregnancy test. The hallways of fertility clinics became painfully familiar as we exhausted options, drained emotions, and dwindled savings. By the time I felt the first flutters of life within me, I had weathered a storm of hormone injections and hope. It wasn't just one heartbeat echoing during the ultrasound. It was two. We named our miracles Gabriel and Sophia. Marco's initial elation at the news of twins soon faded into a distant interest. His involvement was sporadic at best, absent at most. Nights blurred with feedings and diaper changes, often solo endeavors as Marco distanced himself, citing workplace exhaustion. My love for the twins was unbounded, but in the dark circles under my eyes and the ache in my bones, I knew this wasn't the partnership I'd signed up for. Gabriel and Sophia arrived early, fighters from the start. While they lay in the NICU, I laid plans for their future. But Marco, he was like an anchor, dragging my determination through the murky waters of doubt. I pledged to myself that our children would never feel the burden of their father's inattention, a vow heavy with consequence and courage. The first year of their life tested everything I knew about strength. As my body labored to recover, my resolve strained under the weight of Marco's apathy. Support. He called his occasional peeks into their nursery, peppering his absence with excuses and unfulfilled promises. The inequality of our roles grew, a chasm I could no longer bridge with love alone. Yet, the thought of leaving never gained momentum for long. My father had grown sick, the kind of illness that drains life in slow sips. With my mother having passed years before, he had nobody else. And as for me, with no job and savings devoured by IVF, I was tethered to Marco's erratic benevolence like a boat adrift, dependent on his mercies and whims. That day when the vase shattered against the floor, the water drenching my skin, I understood the capacity of our bond's fracture. But I had made a choice to ensure it would not break me. I mopped the floors, silenced the warning of desperation in my heart, and planned. Because all it takes is a moment for fate to align with fortitude, and that moment had come. I just had to reach out and grasp it tightly. The morning sun slanted through the blinds, casting long shadows across what was once a nursery, now a war zone of scattered toys and overturned furniture. Sophia's wails cut through the silence, a shrill reminder that today, like every other day, I would face alone. Gabriel, ever the explorer, had managed to find the one remaining family heirloom, a silver picture frame my grandmother had given me, and was using it as a chew toy. I wrestled it away, my heart sinking. The last piece of my past, the last bit of value I owned other than the roof over our heads, would soon have to be sold. The weight of that decision pulled at my chest, a physical ache that seemed to spread with each labored breath. As much as that frame was a symbol of my heritage, it was now a lifeline, a ticket to keep the lights on and the cupboards from growing bare. Marco, on the other hand, remained blissfully oblivious to the depth of our financial troubles. He had a knack for evading responsibility, an art form he had perfected over the years. I returned to the workforce not by choice but necessity, dropping the twins off at a daycare that drained an already sparse bank account. My absence from the office had made me a stranger in the world I used to dominate, my confidence replaced with apologies and hasty exits whenever the daycare would call about another fever or cough. My supervisors were understanding, yet their patience had limits I dared not test. Each sick day, each rush home felt like a twisted countdown to my professional demise. On one occasion, I mustered the courage to ask Marco for help, yet his excuses danced around any reasonable offer. "I can't. I have a meeting," he would say, or, "They're just kids, they get sick." The burden of solo parenting lay heavy on my shoulders, a mantle I wore out of love for my children, but it was wearing me thin. Resignation from my job was not a choice but a conclusion, the result of countless pressures culminating in a silent scream for reprieve. I confided in my father, whose frailty belied a fierce will. "Elena, my girl, you've borne more than anyone should," he whispered, drawing me close. His hands, once strong, now trembled against my back. "Let me take some of this weight." But how could I? His health teetered on a precarious edge, his life a finicky balance of medication and rest. Adding my burdens to his would be unforgivable. Yet, he insisted, adamant in his resolve. "Family lifts each other up," he said, his voice a feather yet heavy with conviction. "We'll find our way through this, just you wait." My father's assurance was a balm, but it couldn't replace a paycheck. The guilt was a routine visitor, making itself at home within me as I saw the worry etch deeper into his face with every passing day. I was trapped, not by love or duty, but by necessity, a slave to the circumstances I couldn't escape. The silver frame sold to a faceless buyer for a soul-crushing sum, all too soon spent on necessities. As I slid the money over the counter for a week's worth of groceries, the reality of my situation seemed to sharpen into painful focus. I was at the end of my rope, the ends frayed and unwinding. It was time for the care aid to end. It was time to fight back. Uneasy light filtered through the blinds, casting a dull glow over the toys strewn across the floor. The walls of our home, a place that once harbored the whispers of shared dreams, now stood silent, guarding the secret of my crumbling marriage. As Marco's shadow loomed large and menacing within our lives, my space for hope dwindled. His ire had no bounds, no line it wouldn't cross. His voice, once soft and filled with affection, now clenched with contempt. He was a tempest, his anger the crashing waves, and I, a ship made of glass, threatened to shatter with the smallest misstep. The day he hurled his cell phone across the room, narrowly missing Gabriel, who giggled, oblivious to the danger, was the day my tolerance reached its nadir. But there was a spark, faint and flickering, in the gloom. A ray of light began to slip through the shadows. My father. With his health improving and Grandma finally settled into a nursing facility, he was determined to shoulder part of my burden. His arrival marked the first breath of fresh air in a home that had grown stifling. "Lean on me, Elena," he urged, taking the twins in his arms with surprising dexterity for his age. "I'm not made of glass. Let me help you rebuild." And so, with the twins in safer hands, I set off to reclaim the life I had on hold. I reached out to Isabel, my former boss and mentor, who had risen through the ranks with a grace I had always admired. The call was the first step in executing the plan that had brewed in the recesses of my mind, our small act of defiance against Marco's tyranny. "Isabel, it's Elena. I'm thinking of returning to work," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Isabel's response was prompt, sympathetic to the point of painful. "I suspected as much," she confided, a hint of something more in her tone. "There's been something you should know about Marco. Can you come in tomorrow?" The next day, the old familiarity of the office wrapped around me like a well-worn glove as I sat across from Isabel. Despite our formal attire and the polished wood of the desk between us, the atmosphere was intimate, protectively confidential. "He's been unfaithful, Elena," Isabel divulged, cutting straight to the heart of a truth I had already sensed. "With a client's daughter. It's more than gossip. There are receipts, and, well, people have seen them together." The realization stung, a sickening confirmation of the distance between us, yet it was ammunition for what was to come. It propelled me forward, a catalyst for my resolve. I laid bare my intentions for divorce, my need for independence, and Isabel responded not just with support, but with action. She fast-tracked my return to the company, championing my cause with the vigor of a true ally. With every piece that fell into place, I saw the path before me clear, and with a surge of newfound courage I was ready to make move. The evening I set my plan in motion. The house felt larger, the silence louder. Outside, the sunset bled across the sky, a canvas of defiance. Inside, my father whispered stories to the twins as I packed their bags, preparing for the upheaval to come. Marco's business trip was a timely blessing, and with the ink still wet on my letter of resignation, I knew there would be no turning back this time. Every item packed away, every photograph removed from the walls, was a declaration. I was off to change the locks, hand over the house keys to the realtor, and finally step out of the prison Marco had unwittingly built around us. The following morning I left our now bare house, the echo of emptiness reverberating with each step I took. Walking into the office, my nerves buzzed undeniably. A mix of anxiety and adrenaline surged through me. The familiar sights and sounds of the workplace greeted me like old friends long missed. Isabel welcomed me with a warm, conspiratorial smile that did little to quell the flurry of butterflies in my stomach. "You're doing the right thing," Isabel reassured, her gaze steady, her words a solid anchor. "You're taking back control." Her office, once a place for career advice, now served as the backdrop to the unfolding drama of my personal life. Isabel closed the door with a decisive click and, without preamble, unveiled Marco's betrayal in somber detail. He had taken far more than his share of liberties. His affair with the daughter of one of our clients, not just an insult but a liability. It wasn't just our company's reputation at stake, but his professional future. Images of them together lurched at me from the fringes of my mind, yet the revelation steeled me. I wouldn't let his indiscretions be my undoing. "Thank you," I murmured, the weight of the situation settling around me like a cloak. "He won't get away with this." Isabel proceeded to lay out the groundwork for my return to work. As it turned out, they needed someone with my expertise and experience. "It's your second act, Elena," she said, her voice a blend of excitement and firm resolution. But the opportunities didn't end there. After discussing possible starts and positions, Isabel revealed another game-changing detail: a newly implemented on-site daycare, a solution to one of the many complicated puzzles of my life. There was a light at the end of the tunnel, and it was finally bright enough to chase away the shadows that had settled in my heart. Armed with this fresh knowledge and a plan that grew bolder by the minute, I left Isabel's office poised for the impending confrontation. The empty house wasn't just a sign of a life shed. It was the first stone in the foundation of a new one. My father, God bless his resolute heart, backed me every step of the way. It was our secret, a quiet rebellion danced out in the signing of papers and whispers of change. The real estate agent, understanding the delicacy of the situation, had agreed to act quickly. As I met with the realtor, who was keen to capitalize on the property's prime location, I signed off on what was undeniably my most assertive act yet. The house was more mine than Marco's, purchased with my pre-marriage savings and therefore mine to sell. I reflected, not without a twinge of irony, how little Marco had cared for the old place, dismissing it as a temporary inconvenience while we climbed the corporate ladder. Yet now it would become the very instrument of my liberation. The plan was set into motion with a precision that would have impressed even my toughest critics at work. With the realtor's help, we moved swiftly, securing a buyer and moving my family into a comfortable rental. My father, with renewed vigor, was already making the space our own, filling it with laughter and plans for the future. As I lay in bed that evening, staring at the ceiling in the quiet before sleep, the enormity of what I'd done began to sink in. I'd taken back my life, my children's future, and secured our escape. There was no turning back now. The glass doors of the office building seemed heavier than I remembered, but today they parted with the promise of new beginnings. A chorus of unfamiliar yet friendly faces welcomed me, the employees I would soon work alongside. With each step, I anchored myself in the reality of my fresh start. The cloak of anonymity I'd worn during my time away had been shed. I was Elena Vasquez, soon to be Elena Vasquez, single mother and respected professional. Marco, however, remained a storm cloud on the horizon of my newfound clarity. It wasn't long before I heard the familiar cadence of his voice echoing down the hallway as he approached. There was a frantic edge to it, a discordant note that betrayed his composure. His eyes found mine, widening with a mixture of shock and anger. "Where have you been? Where are the kids?" he demanded, his voice sharp, betraying his usual facade of control. Resisting the impulse to back away, I stood my ground. "They're safe," I replied evenly. "They're with my father." Marco's gaze darted around, taking in the faces of our colleagues who had formed an ad hoc audience to the unfolding drama. Isabel stepped forward, her presence a shield between the past and my future. "Welcome back, Elena," she declared with a smile, cutting through the tension. "We've all been looking forward to this day." The assembled coworkers erupted into applause, isolating Marco with their camaraderie. He seemed to shrink, a figure diminishing in the light of collective support. Confused yet defiant, he spluttered, "What is this about? Why didn't you tell me you were coming back?" Isabel, with the poise of someone used to handling delicate situations, responded, "Our company is a family, Marco, and when a member of our family is ready to return, we celebrate." A murmur of agreement hummed through the crowd. I watched as understanding dawned upon Marco's face, the implications of my return, the shattering of the narrative he had constructed for himself. "The daycare," he finally stammered. "The children, they must be." I cut him off, my voice steady, my resolve unwavering. "The children are well taken care of. And as for the daycare, we've been fortunate enough to secure spots for both Gabriel and Sophia." Isabel supplemented my words, addressing Marco. "Indeed, they'll be just fine here. We've made certain of that with our new facility." The room buzzed with whispers of commendation and encouragement as Marco realized the breadth of his miscalculation. He had assumed I'd crumble without him, that I'd be forced to compromise. But as the walls he built around me fell away, his own began to close in. "Let's discuss this privately," Marco hissed, reaching for my arm. Resisting his touch, I produced the single item that symbolized the end of our union, a business card from a divorce attorney. His eyes flickered with defeat as I announced, "Please divorce me, Marco." Gasps and whispers filled the room, and I watched as the mask of charm Marco had always worn dissolved into a frown of disbelief. He was silent, searching for words that wouldn't come. Each heartbeat in the silence felt like an eternity, but ultimately it was Isabel's voice that filled the void. "Marco, I think it's time you and the higher-ups had a conversation." Humiliation flared across Marco's face as he backed away, realizing his private indiscretions were far less private than he had believed. As the weight of his deeds crept upon him, he slumped his shoulders, defeated and exposed. I turned away, leaving the broken vase of our marriage behind, and with it the shards of our tarnished past. The flicker of twilight's last stand gave way to night's embrace, as I sat in the quiet comfort of our new rental home, the twins sound asleep in their freshly assembled beds. It was incredible how silence had once been my enemy, filled with the tension of waiting for Marco's critique or outburst. Yet here it was now, a peaceful testament to the change I had courageously enacted. My phone's insistent ringtone splintered the calm. Marco's name flashed on the screen, a vestige of the life I was steadily discarding. With a calming breath, I answered, bracing for the storm I knew I had stirred. "Elena, what have you done?" Marco's voice, barely intelligible between sobs and fury, crackled through the speaker. "I've started over, Marco, for myself and for our children," I replied, my voice a beacon in the tumult. He was in disbelief, reeling from the discovery of my actions, the sale of the house, the relocation of our family. The life he had taken for granted, dismantled, sold off to the highest bidder. My heart might have winced at his confusion once, but that empathy had dissolved with every disparaging remark, every angry shout, every tear shed in solitude because of him. "Our house, our home, it's empty. Where are Gabriel and Sophia and all our things?" He was frantic, grasping at the fragments of control that slipped through his fingers like fine sand. Calmness steadied my response. "It's all taken care of, Marco. The children are with my father, and our possessions are here with us in our new place." "You sold our house without my consent? Without even telling me?" His incredulity suggested betrayal, the irony stinging like salt in a wound. "I did what was necessary, Marco. The house was mine before we married. I used my savings for the down payment, remember?" I spoke the truth he could not refute, the reality he had ignored in favor of his self-centered narrative. "The real estate agent worked with us to find a buyer. It's done. We are moving on." He struggled for words, lost in the labyrinth of his making. When they finally came, they were edged with despair. I thought we were going to discuss this, figure things out. There's nothing left to figure out. It's over, Marco. My finger hovered over the end call button, ready to sever the last of our ties. But where will I go? He pleaded, the mighty Marco reduced to echoes of vulnerability. That's for you to decide. Just know that Gabriel and Sophia will always be cared for, with or without you. The finality of my words seemed to drape over us, a curtain closing on the theater of our farce. I wasted no time after the call, swiftly blocking Marco's number, a line I never thought I'd cross. In the days that followed, legal motions unraveled the entanglements of our failed marriage. Custody, assets, child support. An avalanche of documents and signatures wiped clean the slate, giving rise to my long-awaited freedom. Rumors of his affair saw Marco ousted from his lofty perch, and without the shield of our company's prestige, he eventually resigned. Last I heard, his pride had surrendered to necessity, placing him in a humbler line of work. The whispers of his downfall weaved through the industry like a cautionary tale, a high price paid for hubris and betrayal. Before me lied the blank pages of our lives, ready to be filled with the tales of our choosing. A chapter closed, a book ended, and the narrative was mine to write anew. The morning sun painted hues of gold and amber across the sky, casting a warm glow over the breakfast table where Gabriel and Sophia munched on their cereal with eagerness which only children possess. The atmosphere was serene, a stark contrast to the vortex of recent events. As we sat around the table, my father, the twins, and I formed a new picture, a frame of family redefined by solidarity and love. Those early days of our new life felt like living in a dream, one where I half expected to wake to the sound of Marco's voice demanding an explanation, but that never happened. The twins adapted with the resilience of youth, and over time, peace became our new normal. The transition back into work was smooth, even liberating. Colleagues who had once pitied me now greeted me with respect. My input was once again valued, my insights sought after, and my presence acknowledged. Isabel had checked in often, ensuring that the integration was seamless and that I settled into the rhythm easily. The on-site daycare was a godsend, offering not just convenience but a level of care and attention that left me reassured during the workday. As the days eased into weeks and the weeks meshed into months, we settled into a comfortable routine. Life without Marco's overbearing presence transformed from an initial breath-holding suspense into a deep, gratifying exhale. The fear of his volatility and the anxiety over our future had dissolved into a renewed sense of purpose and independence. Catherine had been true to her word. The whole office seemed to rally around me. Some came by just to tell me how they admired my strength. Others gently shared their own stories of overcoming difficulties. The solidarity was unexpected but deeply appreciated. Even the higher-ups, who were initially guarded, offered their unofficial nods of approval and encouragement. Of course, there were challenges. The twins, with their boundless energy and ceaseless curiosity, ensured there was never a dull moment. The balance between work, motherhood, and personal growth was a delicate dance, but one I was determined to master. Every step I took with a clarity I had not felt in years. I took my father's advice to remain involved with the community to heart. Being active in local events, meeting neighbors, and contributing to the twins' daycare activities provided a sense of belonging. In the shared experiences of parenting and bits of leisurely chats by the playground, I found companionship and a thread of connection weaving into the fabric of our new lives. Gabriel and Sophia burgeoned in this new environment, their laughter a confirmation that leaving Marco had been the right decision. When they hugged me tightly with tiny arms that promised eternity, I knew we had a bright future ahead. All things considered, the upheaval had led to a life more vibrant and fulfilling than I dared to imagine when trapped beneath Marco's shadow. My parents had instilled in me the values of strength, optimism, and resilience, qualities I aimed to pass on to my children. Looking ahead, I saw more than just a flickering light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. I saw brilliant sunshine painting our path forward. As I turned the key in the door of our new home, it was more than just an entranceway. It was a gateway to the promise of tomorrow. And with one last glance back at the road traveled and the traces of the struggle behind us, I stepped through with my head held high, ready for whatever awaited us on the other side.
My name is Mandy Gale. I've been married for 3 years and don't have any children yet. The more we wish for a child, it seems, the harder it is to have one. My husband and I live with his parents. Since we haven't had children in 3 years of marriage, living together hasn't changed the outcome. That was the reason for living with my in-laws. And my husband agreed to this nonsensical reason. We live in such a big house. It won't be a problem if my parents move in, right? I couldn't argue with that. Indeed, there aren't any problems, and it's just a bit of extra care. However, what surprised me after moving in was that my in-laws believed this big, spacious house was purchased solely with my husband's salary. And they think my card is being paid for with his income and freely spend as they please. My husband is 30 and works a regular office job. An employee of his age wouldn't earn such a high salary. Yet, without any doubt, they believe whatever my husband says. So, how is such a thing possible? Because I am the president of a company with over 1,000 employees. However, I haven't even told my husband about this. If my husband knew about my salary, he would definitely become dependent on me and turn into a good-for-nothing. I've learned since we got married that he is extremely dependent and can easily lie. That's why I decided never to reveal my situation. But it can't stay hidden forever. After all, my husband works at my company. One day, he saw a company brochure and exclaimed with sparkling eyes, "Hey, Mandy, you've become the president?" Considering my husband prefers playing over working, he shouldn't be looking at company brochures. I hadn't cared about the brochure. However, as my husband excitedly showed it to me, I felt an internal panic. That's when I told a painful lie. It's a misprint. A misprint? Yes, I told them to correct that, but it seems they haven't yet. Why would there be a misprint? Well, you see, it's my father's company. I'm just the secretary, but the person in charge made a mistake. Oh, I see. I thought you had become the president for a moment. Too bad. If you were the president, I could have lived off playing. As if that could ever happen. If I were the president, I would be earning more and living a better life, wouldn't I? Right. A woman couldn't possibly handle being a president, huh? I thought he was a fool for believing such a silly lie, but I was truly grateful he was a fool at that moment. However, this level of foolishness was starting to become unbearable. The thing is, for about a year now, my husband has been growing colder. I don't know why. I loved him and envied his carefree nature, which I could only dream of since I took everything too seriously. And I thought he loved me too. But it seems I was only me who thought so. That belief turned into certainty the day I saw my husband walking and chatting cozily with the receptionist. I had no idea she was his mistress and casually approached them. Mandy. My husband's face turned pale in an instant. Why are you here? Huh, the way you're surprised, could it be you? Then the receptionist, Sarah, laughed and said, I've got the company heir. What? Who's the heir? Confused by her unclear words, my husband hurriedly added. Unlike the gloomy and unsociable woman, a model-like lover. I love Sarah. That's why I've decided to remarry her. What? I didn't understand what he was saying. Certainly, the woman in front of me was young and beautiful, like a model. I think it was my husband who said we should hire a beautiful woman for the receptionist because it would make a good impression. I thought it was good enough if she could do her job, but my husband, believing I was the secretary, told me. The reception is the face of the company. It has to be a beauty, or it'll turn the clients off. Tell that to the president. And so Sarah was hired. Certainly, wherever you look, the receptionists are beautiful, so hiring a beauty would indeed be better for the image. I naively thought so. But I never imagined it would turn out this way. Remarry? How? You're married, aren't you? I have to divorce first, obviously. Of course I'll divorce. You intend to divorce me? Yes, of course. You are really gloomy and don't suit me. What suits me is a bright and charming woman like this. I see. I didn't know how to respond to his seemingly innocent words. Nor could I, as the president, start yelling and screaming. I see. Congratulations. Inadvertently, pride took over, and words that seemed to condone his infidelity slipped out. I left the scene and headed to our house my husband would probably not return to. When I got home, I entered the bedroom and sat down in a daze. The scene kept replaying in my mind. Sarah's arm wrapped around my husband's. His face, beaming with joy. Sarah is pointing at a brand store, expressing her desire for something inside. My husband nods in agreement, referring to me with the words, the gloomy and unsociable woman. I thought. So, I wasn't loved after all. I was the only one who loved him, and he saw me that way. I finally understand why Brian has been cold to me. If he's in a relationship with such a beautiful woman, it makes sense that he would grow cold. Moreover, if he's considering remarriage, there couldn't possibly be any love left for me. All I had was the profile of being the president's daughter. Was our marriage just based on that attraction? What a sad marriage it was. When we first married, I never imagined it would come to this. He was kind and always gave me plenty of sweet words. When I was troubled by small things, he reassured me that such worries were trivial and eased my anxieties. How happy that made me feel. Until the president left the office, I couldn't leave either as his secretary. My husband believed this lie and prepared meals for me. This stopped once we started living with his parents. It's only natural for a wife to cook. It's wrong not to take care of the home just because you have a job. After a tiring day, I'd come home to find delivered meals on the table, all plates empty. There was nothing left for me, and my husband and his parents were contentedly sprawled in front of the TV. In the end, it was my job to clean up the dirty dishes, and the trash can was stuffed with boxes I had never seen before. It felt so empty and lonely, and I wondered why I was the only one who had to endure this. I couldn't understand any of it anymore. But realizing that infidelity was the reason, I thought I couldn't just let this go. I thought, that's right. I should consult with my father. If anyone has a good idea, it would be the chairman, my father. Grabbing my bag and glancing at my in-laws sprawled in front of the living room TV, I dashed out of the house. The next day, I summoned my husband to the president's office. He arrived in the president's office with a broad smile, thinking the president was my father. Huh? Where's your father? Dad's in the chairman's office. Why are you here? This is the president's office, and it's odd for you, the secretary, to be sitting in that chair. Even if you are family, you shouldn't casually sit in the president's chair. Only someone like me, the next president, should sit here. You, a regular employee, will become president? I'm just a regular employee now, but I'm your husband, so it's only natural. Well, Dad is sitting in the chairman's office, in the chairman's chair. What? So, someone else is sitting in the president's chair? The person in front of you is sitting, huh? What are you talking about? You're just the president's secretary. How long will you keep thinking that? What? I am the president. Huh? What are you talking about? There's no way you, a woman, could be the president. If that were the case, this company would have gone bankrupt. But the company hasn't gone bankrupt. You say a woman can't handle being president, or that women can't do proper jobs, but here I am, managing just fine as president. This makes no sense. Isn't it time you accepted it? You're joking, right? I displayed the company's website on the computer screen, showing him my photo with the title president. What, even the website is wrong? You better get it corrected. You refuse to believe it, don't you? You might not want to believe that your wife is the president, but this is the fact. Pointing to the nameplate on the desk, I showed him the title president, clearly written next to Mandy Gale. No way. Looks like you finally believe it. So, that's how it is. Now I can live off playing around. What are you talking about? Didn't you say yesterday that you were divorcing me? Well, that was just. Then. I order your transfer. What? A transfer? Why does it have to be like that? You've been unfaithful, and you're also planning to divorce. It's only natural that you face some consequences. If I'm transferred, I can't become president. President? Why do you think you could become president? I'm your husband. Yes, you are. Don't we need a successor? You seem to forget an important thing. I am younger than you. Logically, I'll live longer. So, there's no need for a next president. But I married you so I could become president. But you've decided to divorce, so there's no way you can be president, right? Just because we're divorced doesn't mean that won't happen. You're so carefree. I never intended to make you president in the first place. And you want to remarry her, right? If I'm around, that'd be inconvenient for you, so I'll grant you a divorce. Here, sign here. It's already filled out. I placed the pre-filled divorce papers in front of my husband. However, understanding that signing this would be final, he seemed unable to reach for the divorce papers immediately. You don't need to take it now, but I'll make sure the divorce goes through with the help of a lawyer. I no longer acknowledge you as my husband. What? If Sarah finds out I can't become the president, she might just leave me. It's quite something to say that in front of your wife. If you want to remarry her, you'll have to divorce me first. Or do you intend to keep her as your mistress? Either way, I'm done with you. Well, beauties like her are rare. Then there's no choice but to divorce, is there? I'm going to divorce you, so you can remarry or do whatever you like. Worrying won't change the outcome. You're still going to be transferred to the subcontracting transport company. To the transport company? Yes, you betrayed your wife, the president, so that's what you deserve. Now, our conversation is over. Call your girlfriend. What are you going to do with her? She will be transferred to a different department. Are you trying to separate us? Whether you get separated is your own issue. Given the mess you've made, some form of punishment is necessary. This is a corporate decision, so nothing you say can change it. Please, don't be too harsh on her. I'm not going to do anything terrible. Just what's necessary. Hurry up and call her in. As I shouted this, Brian's shoulders slumped and he left the president's office. The next person to come in was the receptionist, Sarah. Huh? Why is his wife here? Do you also doubt that I am the president? But Brian said it was a typo that you are the president. Believe it or not, I don't care. But as you've taken the president's husband, you will be transferred to the factory. The factory? Why? Why does someone as beautiful as me have to go to the factory? Is there a problem with a beautiful woman working at the factory? But the factory is for old ladies and men, not for someone like me. That's a misconception. What are you talking about? I hate this. It's ridiculous. Even if you do this, it won't break us apart. I don't care if it does or not. I've already given him the divorce papers. If you're going to remarry, do as you please. Really? Yes. Then I can marry into the company's heir family? Heir? Yes. Marrying him means I could eventually become the president of the company. It might not be right now because of this incident, but once things cool down, he's bound to become the president. After all, he's the president's son. You seem to be under some major misunderstanding. Well, that's fine. But are you serious? Do you really love him? Of course. I thought. She thinks he's the heir. If you love him that much, you should be able to endure. Endure? What do you mean? Hasn't he told you anything? Told me what? He lives with his parents. That means I've been living with the in-laws. The in-laws are big spenders and don't even cook for themselves. So you'll have to do all the cooking or rely on delivery. Since I was president, I often came home late, and they used to order delivery almost every day. Well, that's okay. I don't think delivery is bad. But his salary won't cover the costs. But he has managed until now. Because of my income. Oh. They could do that because I was the president. So now, you'll have to cook daily, or it'll be tough. He'll do it, I'm sure. You think so? He doesn't do housework. He thinks that's a woman's job. Even if the trash bin is overflowing, he won't move it back. Really? Well, okay. I get to live in that big house, after all. The house? Yes. That house was bought with his salary. So even if you divorce, that house stays with us. There will be no division of property. Oh, you think so? Of course I do. Well, you'll see. Just be careful of the in-laws' spending habits. I'm out of it anyway. He'll handle it. After all, they're his parents. It's not my concern. Besides, if they like delivery, it will save my labor. I like delivery too. More importantly, there's no way someone as beautiful as me should do kitchen work. My hands would get chapped. You think so? I hope that belief won't change. You're just trying to scare me, aren't you? Huh? Female jealousy is scary, isn't it? But I appreciate you letting me know about the divorce. So, can we pretend the factory transfer never happened? I'm not going to the factory, and I'm quitting the company. Quitting? Yes, why should I work so hard when I'm about to marry him? I'm going to marry into a wealthy family. I'm about to debut in high society. There's no need for me to work. Wow, that's very optimistic of you. Well, okay then. Sarah then said, I'll submit my resignation letter. And left my office. However, despite her confident words, it seemed my comments had struck a chord. That night, she shared her anxieties with Brian. Hey, is there anything you need to tell me? Huh? No, nothing at all. I was told I'd be transferred, but what about you? Well, I will stay at the headquarters because I'm the president's son. So your life remains unchanged? Of course, I'm the heir. Who else would run the company if I were gone? But Mandy is currently the president, right? Oh, yeah. That's temporary. After this cools down, I'll take over as president. Running a company involves a lot of external affairs, you know? But don't worry, being my wife was just a role she played. Once we're divorced, she won't be around anymore. Really? Yes, really. That's a relief. I quit my job because I was told I'd be working at the factory. What? Well, a beauty like me doesn't belong in a factory, right? Yes, of course. Don't worry, I'll take care of you. After all, I'm the heir. So everything she said was just to scare me. Who? You mean Mandy? Yes, she called me in today and said a lot. But there's nothing to worry about, right? Because everything you say is consistent. You being the heir is an undeniable fact, right? Absolutely. Sarah smiled at Brian, but just then, his phone rang. Seeing my name on the screen, he tapped the answer button. What's up, calling at this hour? Sorry to interrupt your fun time, but I have something important to discuss. What is it? The house. You need to move out within a week. What? Why? I'm giving the house back to my father. Why? We're divorced, and it's inconvenient if you don't leave. Can't I just stay? No, you can't. It's my father's property. Why does it work like that? You said it was a gift. He was just lending it because we were newlyweds and I was the president. It seemed pitiful to let us live in a shabby place, so he bought and lent us that house. But now that we're divorced, you wouldn't want to live in a house full of memories, right? It's just my father being considerate. I don't mind living in a house full of memories. You have no right to live there. It's my father's property. If you really want to stay, ask my father. But we lived there, it should be part of our shared assets. It should be divided. As I said just now, the house was borrowed from my father. It's not subject to division. Everything in that house was also provided by him. But I'll give you all the money in your bank account. Not much, but better than me taking half, right? But where am I supposed to go? Isn't there a room where she lives? It's just an apartment. That's not my problem. You chose it. And make sure to take your parents with you. Damn. I forgot about my parents. Oh, that's too bad. Come on, since my parents are there, let us stay in that house. Your parents are your responsibility. It has nothing to do with me. With that, the call was abruptly ended. A week later, Brian and his parents moved out. Their new home was, of course, Sarah's apartment. They must be managing somehow as a family of 4. At least, that's what I thought. However, 3 months later, Brian called again. This is the worst. As soon as I answered the phone, he blurted out without any greeting. Oh, what happened? She found out everything I told her was a lie. What you told her? What kind of things? That I was the heir, the president's son. That I was still working at headquarters and would someday become president, despite being assigned to delivery. What? That's nothing but a bunch of lies. All lies, huh? I had no choice. I don't see how you had no choice. I thought if we got married before the lies were uncovered, then it wouldn't matter if they eventually came out. Once we were married, it wouldn't be easy to get divorced. So, you did get married, didn't you? That's just it, she refused. Plus, she said she couldn't stand living in a cramped apartment with 4 adults. If we were to marry, she said I'd have to sort out a house. Well, that makes sense. She started saying that it didn't make sense, the moment we divorced, to let go of the house which I used to say was mine. And that if I'm a true heir, I should be able to sort out a house. I can see that. She was so furious and said, why do I have to live in an apartment like this even though I'm rich? That's why I told her I've always dreamed of living in an apartment because I've always lived in big houses, but she hates the idea of living in such a small place. Well, she would say that, wouldn't she? And now, my parents are saying, how long do we have to live in this cramped place? I told them to wait because the house is being built, but then she started demanding to see the house under construction. I asked her if she didn't believe me. It would be crazy to believe you, given all the lies. I got told something similar. I'm amazed you can keep stacking up lies like that. Maybe you should have been a con artist? That's too much. So she left you? Yeah, eventually, she couldn't take it anymore and said, let's live together again once the house is built, and kicked me out. Ha! Kicked out, huh? So now I have nowhere to go. My parents are with me, what should I do? I don't know. My parents are old, so I can't just let them sleep outside. Why don't you sleep in a hostel? They're aged. How can they do that? Plus, all our stuff got thrown out. How could you be so heartless? I don't know. You reap what you sow. Instead of blaming others, maybe you should reflect on your actions. Look, I can't marry her without a house. Let me stay in that house. If we stay like this, my parents might get sick. I can't help you with that. Please help me, I'm begging you. How about I rent it to you for $5,000 a month? $5,000 a month? That's impossible. How much do you think I make? Before you were transferred, you were making about $3,000, right? Now that you're just arranging deliveries, it must be around $2,000. Yeah, that's right. My salary has dropped by $1,000. But it's easy, isn't it? Well, it's easy, but... You said you wanted to live easily, so this situation suits you perfectly. But with a salary of $2,000, How can I afford to pay $5,000? That's why an apartment suits you better. It might be right for my salary, but it's nowhere near big enough. You know that. There are 4 of us, my parents and Sarah. That house is the best option for us. Then pay $5,000, and I'll let you rent it. That's ridiculous. I can't afford that. Then you'll just have to give up. You need to figure it out yourself. I'm asking because I can't handle it on my own. Plus, my parents are really extravagant. They're even talking about staying at luxury hotels now, can you believe it? Oh, they got used to spending money when they were using my credit card, remember? They've become accustomed to it after being poor originally. Tough situation. Exactly. I don't understand why they've become so extravagant. When I was a kid, we used to be so frugal. I'd get scolded for leaving the water running, and if I left food on my plate, the same dish would keep appearing until I finished it. Eventually, it would just dry out. We were that frugal, but now this? That's because they were using my card all the time. And it was a black card, so it had no limits. Your card, that was mine, right? Have you ever seen the bill? You never paid a cent. I covered everything. Is that right? Yes, I did that to spare you any trouble. You were able to act all high and mighty without knowing anything. I was really trying hard for your parents. Is that so? Okay. Let's get married again. What? If we get married, I won't have to worry about money. I can put up with you being gloomy and unsociable. And what about your girlfriend? She can just be my mistress. Oh, you're not marrying her? No way. She's a beautiful woman with a terrible personality. You're actually better suited for me. So, let's remarry and start over. Oh really? You know, Sarah is here right now. We've been listening to you on speaker mode. What? Why is Sarah there? She became suspicious if what you were saying was true or not, so she came to me to verify. Everything you've been saying has been heard by her too. Sarah, it's all a misunderstanding. I love you. Enough. You liar. Sarah finally realized Brian's lies and yelled at him in anger as she declared their breakup. Afterward, Brian apparently tried everything he could to win her back. Irritated by his persistence, Sarah, seeking to get even with Brian, approached me for advice on how to retaliate. So I suggested. How about I sue him for alimony? You can see him suffer from the debt. She liked the idea. Even after that, Brian kept pursuing her, and she finally moved to another state. When she settled down, I contacted Brian, saying, "You were supposed to pay me alimony, so pay up at once or I will garnish your wages." He cried out in disbelief. Despite his pleas to get back together, I refused, saying our divorce made it none of my concern. Meanwhile, his parents' spending habits didn't improve, and with monthly bills and alimony payments, he ended up juggling day and night jobs, visibly losing weight. As for me, I returned to my family home after breaking up with him. Free from stress and personal distractions, I recently found a compatible business partner and am living my best life.